Hi, I'm Ember, and I'm cooking with you today. What we're gonna call this is cocktail cooking. We're gonna take a simple meal like steak, broccoli, and corn, and we're gonna incorporate something more extravagant, like rum. And what pairs good with rum? Lime. The difference between a rum and coke and a Cuba Libre is just lime. It's that simple to move your meal to the next level. So I'm gonna show you in your own home how comfortable it is to make your meal a classy one. I do have the experience at Le Cordon Bleu and I've had history with cooking in different kitchens, but I want to show you that it's as easy and comfortable in your own home because it's your kitchen and it's your creation. Okay, we're gonna get started. So we're first gonna start with the key lime pie because that takes the longest to cook. It's always nice to have that done and ready in time for your cooking the meal. We're gonna get this out of the way, but it won't go far, don't worry. And I'm just gonna grab some recipes here. So what we wanna start out with is actually crushing the graham crackers. I'm gonna start with one bag here just because we can always add some if we need more later. You never know who's gonna come over. And got my handy dandy Ziploc bag. We're gonna put these inside. Now sometimes it gets a little bit tricky to crush the graham crackers evenly. I'm gonna show you a trick for that. I'm gonna take all the air out because it's easier to roll without the air in there. And I'm gonna grab my rolling pin. So now what we're gonna do with this is it can help to just smack it down and break it up into initial pieces, kind of get it started. Now that's already pretty much broken up the pieces into both powder and chunks. I'm gonna start at the top here and I'm actually gonna take it piece by piece and I'm gonna roll it towards the top of the bag. What that's gonna do is evenly disperse the crumbs. And you can already see that this half of the bag is powder and this half of the bag is still chunks. So I'm just gonna continue that through. Okay, and that looks great. You can see there's some other chunks in here, but I actually like kind of a crummy, get it, because it's crummy, a crummy thick crust. Okay, now that we have our bag of graham crackers, I'm gonna put this back and grab a bowl to put them in. And although graham crackers are delicious, I'm gonna give a little bit extra sugar in here just to sweeten the deal. Sometimes if you think that this is actually too much graham cracker, you can put some back in the bag and just save it on a shelf. You can use any extra graham cracker crumbs on like ice cream for toppings or maybe a cake crust or maybe a cherry cheesecake. Okay, now I'm getting hungry. So we're gonna actually grab some sugar and I'm gonna do something that my culinary chef will not be proud of. I'm gonna actually use the liquid measuring cup to measure a dry. Now this is the case because we're actually filming this in my brother's house. And although I love him, he does not have all the utensils that we need. And I just wanna show that in your own home, you can use whatever you have available to you. So what I'm gonna do is actually pour in, it's about a 1/4 cup, give or take. And it doesn't have to be exact. It's your kitchen, your creation. So then if you see here, I've got a 1/4 cup. Now to help make this an even quarter, you just tap it on the cutting board and you can get that nice level line. With this cutting of graham crackers and sugar, you really don't have to have less or more. You can kind of mix whatever you feel is what you need. If you got a sweet tooth, you can put a lot more sugar in there. And then all we're gonna do is put a dash of salt to give it that contrast. With salt, you never want to pour right into the container. If you're a klutz like me, the cap will come off and then you have to start all over. And I don't want to start over. These graham crackers are too perfect. So I'm going to do about a teaspoon of like the center portion of your hand. That's always a good starting point. And I always use kosher salt. I feel like it gets the flavor better. It really pulls what you're trying to make into the taste. And then you're just gonna sprinkle it in or dump it in if you're sure on the amount. But this way you kind of have a catch before you dump it into the actual container. So the next step is we're gonna have to melt some butter to make this into like a solidified crust. So I'm gonna put the sugar back and grab some butter. Sometimes people think that you need a lot of butter. You really don't. All the butter is doing is making it a bit stiffer to actually form. So I'm gonna use about half of this stick, but I'm only going to melt maybe 3 of the tablespoons. If I need this extra tablespoon, it's ready to go and I can toss it in. Now, microwave. I do about 30 seconds. You just wanna make it able to blend in with the crumbs. It doesn't have to be completely liquid, just soft enough to be able to really blend it together. Now I'm actually gonna use a fork to blend this together because I want the sugars and the graham crackers to really blend between the fork tongs. Not a big deal, you could use your hand if you wanted to, whatever you're comfortable with. So this is my butter. I think that that's gonna be enough, but we're only gonna pour some in and then we're gonna see how it comes across. That's really not enough yet. You can see how some parts are actually melting, but the others aren't. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it all. And that looks a lot better. Now I think with this, we could actually do that last tablespoon of butter. Okay, we're gonna melt down this last tablespoon of butter and add it to it. It doesn't necessarily need the full 30 seconds. It's not as much butter. So we'll just watch the little guy and make sure he doesn't burn. So this is kind of what I was talking about. There's some liquid in there, but it's also the tab of butter that you see. That's soft enough. You're gonna be able to blend that in with your crumbs. Okay, now that we have a crummy crust, I'm gonna grab the pan and we'll start to put in what we need for the bottom. Now I wanted to do maybe a fun shape for these. So what I'm gonna actually do, instead of making one key lime pie, I'm gonna do individual ones. You never know who's coming over for dinner, so it's good to have a few of them set up and a few of them you can freeze, and then you can just pop them out when you're ready. What I did to make this easier is actually cut just like 2.5 strips of parchment paper. This is gonna make me be able to pull the key lime pie out in this little saddle, and it's a lot easier to store and it looks a lot cleaner. Now that does make it a little bit trickier when you're pouring the filling in, but that's what practice is for, and rum. The good news about using measuring for your ingredients is that you're usually prepared on how many is gonna come out. Now I'm not, because I'm very generalist with measuring. I don't wanna go overboard. I don't wanna say, 1.5 teaspoons of this. I wanna be comfortable in the kitchen that I'm working in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up 2 rows, and if it ends up being more than that. Okay, got that set. So we're gonna put the crust into the bottom of these. Now you can do however much crust that you want. I think personally I like a thick layer. So I usually cover the bottom, coat the bottom, and then I give it 1 more scoop. Now we are gonna have to press the crumbs down because that is the foundation of our pie. We don't want the foundation to be shaky unless you want maybe a soft pie. Now I'm gonna use my hands. You can use whatever you prefer. Some people use a spoon. With these tight little squares, it can't always get in there. If you're not a person to get your hands dirty, you can always just use a rubber glove or some kind of saran wrap to cover it first. It does help though if you're using saran wrap to give it a little spray so that you don't pull the crumbs off with it. I'm not pushing extremely hard. I'm just making sure that it's a little bit packed. And that's also gonna make sure that when I pour the filling in, it's not gonna disperse all those crumbs. It's gonna actually just form a layer on top. I also wanted to say, if you're not sure how much sugar or butter to put into your graham cracker crumbs, just try some. Taste testing is something that You can do with any ingredient as long as you're careful around raw meats. But it's something I highly suggest. I think it gets you comfortable on what you're working with. And actually, if maybe you want to add something fun, give it a taste, see if it'll go with it. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually bake this crust just for a short period of time. So a little trick to that I'm going to do is I'm going to preheat the oven. It needs to be at 350. And what I'm going to do is put this in right away, even though it's not completely heated to that temperature, because then by the time it's preheated, you know your crust is absolutely fine. We'll pull it out, then complete with the filling. So while the crust is hardening, I'm gonna go ahead and grab some stuff for the filling. Let's clear out our space a little bit here. I'm gonna put the graham crackers in the Ziploc bag for a later time. Will be for that ice cream topping later when it's really needed. And you don't have to keep this in the fridge. I like to because we put butter in here. Kind of gives it a fresh feel to it. You can always vamp it up too if you want to reuse it. You can add a little bit more sugar, a little bit of butter. Some people even use brown sugar instead of white sugar. You live your dreams. Okay. And then what I'm actually going to pull out of the fridge are my eggs. And it's hard to grab 3 with one hand. So we're going to start with 3. And we're actually only going to use the egg yolks. So I'm going to put the egg yolks in this bowl. So I have this little dish here to keep my egg whites in, nice and clean, hopefully. Now, if I mess this up, that's okay, because it's my kitchen, my creation. And of course, the shell did not break that easily. So what I'm going to actually do, when the shell doesn't break evenly in half like that, you're going to use your fingers. And you're just going to let that egg yolk ride and cradle your hand. The egg yolk will fall off, and if it doesn't, you can always just use your other fingers as scissors to pull it off. Okay, that egg yolk we're gonna save, and we're gonna try it better this way. This is the one, we'll make it classy. Come in, there it is. So when this happens, you can actually just juggle the egg yolk until all the white falls off. That's the shot, that's for the camera, okay. One more. Good or bad, it's going in there. So we've got 3 egg yolks. So now that we have our egg yolks, I'm gonna rinse my fingers because they're covered in egg whites. And I'm going to also grab my lime juice and condensed milk. Now I am in my brother's kitchen, which is a great thing for several reasons, but one of them is that his island does not have an outlet, which I don't like. Buy a new house. So we're gonna actually move this over to the corner where there is a lovely outlet. And I'm gonna use this hand mixer to actually thicken up the yolks before we add the condensed milk and the lime juice. So all that does is really thicken it up. You can see that they're displaced like that. You're not gonna get any yolk chunks. Then what we're gonna add next is our condensed milk. I love condensed milk. This is also the thickening agent, which is gonna make that key lime filling real creamy. So I'm actually going to use the whole can. It's your preference. If you don't use the whole can, I would suggest maybe adding another egg yolk. So we've got a good amount of condensed milk and we have a good amount of egg yolks. Give it one more stir here. And I'm gonna actually do this for a few minutes to let that fluff up and really thicken itself. Okay, that's looking really good. You don't want to get too frothy. So what I'm gonna do is set it down here and I'll show you how I got my lime juice. Oh, goodness. So lime juice, we're gonna go ahead and show you how that happens. Now fresh lime is always best. Fresh anything, always best. But all I do is I actually use a juicer like this. I really like the handheld ones. Make sure it's metal though. The plastic ones don't seem to have that good hinge point on there, especially if you have some fresh limes. Now I do want to show you when you're cutting your limes, before you cut into it at all, to get the most out of your buck here, is to actually massage the lime. So you want to kind of give it a roll. What this does is it's releasing the tension inside the lime and it's really juicing it up. So you're going to get what you want out of it, you're going to actually get the juice. This is good for anything. You can do this on oranges, you can do this on any kind of fruit. It's protected in its rough hide here. So what you want is what's inside, and you're gonna get the most out of it, less work for you, right? Smarter, not harder. I take my juicer, and I actually cut the limes in thirds. I think it's easier on yourself. You don't wanna kill yourself with these exercises here. Who says it's not exercise to cook? And it will spray places, so be prepared. Shouldn't have worn white. That's me. So when you're squeezing it in there, you can just make sure everything fiber-based is gonna stay inside this juicer. The only thing is if you're crushing it too much, some of this fiber is going to come through the holes, but it shouldn't fall into the juice. And even if it does, it's not gonna hurt your pie. It's gonna be delicious either way. And we'll just do one more here. Now I did about 5, 6 limes. You don't necessarily have to use it all in here. When I'm making this meal, I'm actually incorporating the lime and rum into each segment of it. So we'll be able to use it somewhere, no worries. Make a little martini later or something. That'll be the appetizer. So now that I have my lime juice, I have probably about 2.5 cups in here right now, if you want a measurement. But I'm pretty free flowing, so it doesn't have to be a measurement. I'm gonna move this back over to the corner where there's an outlet, Grant, and we're gonna go ahead and start the mixer up again. Now, when you're incorporating the lime juice, you wanna pay attention to, right now you have a creamy kind of frothy base. When you're putting a liquid like this in, you have to incorporate it at the same time of pouring it. The reason is, I'll actually show you, there can be a breaking point where if you're not blending it together at the same time, it disperses into like an oil and a solid. So I'll show you that. Okay, now if I pour a little bit in, and let's say I don't mix it right away. So you have the juice that's displacing the cream. So what you want is, you want the condensed milk and the egg yolk to work together and combine. So you never want to see this action. If you're ever seeing this, you haven't incorporated it well. So this is still savable. We're gonna go ahead and blend this in. And you can kind of see it combine. You want to get all the way to the edges because that's where the juice likes to ride. And we're gonna go ahead and incorporate more. Now that looks really good. It's got a good blend to it. It's gonna be easy to pour into the pan, but I don't know if it's enough lime. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna taste test this a little bit. It's not gonna be that bad. There are egg yolks in here, but if you're not scooping it by the spoonful, I think you're probably gonna be okay. So I'm just gonna grab a tablespoon, taste test spoon is what we like to call it. And I'm just gonna dip it in. And it's got that good coat on there, so. Oh, it's so good. It is so good. Okay, so there's plenty of lime, and I heard the oven. So we're gonna go ahead and pull out our crust, get our oven mitts. This is why we drink after we cook. Okay, and you can kind of see that the crust is a little bit darker on the edges. That's a really good sign. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna set this aside, and we're going to go ahead and pour the filling into the crust. My preference though is to just pour it, cross your fingers. Okay, so what I need to help pour this is actually a spatula. So I'll bring some of this stuff out of the way, and I'm gonna grab the spatula here and clean up the bowl. You wanna make sure that it is all incorporated. I hate to start pouring and then find, oh, look at how thick that is. Oh, that's so nice. So when you make a swipe and you can see that it's actually splitting, like Moses is splitting the sea, we can actually see that that's a good thickness right there. It looks like pudding, okay? Don't eat it, there's raw eggs in there. Just taste it. So now I know it's all incorporated. Sometimes the mixer really can't get in the bowl shape. So now there's no chance there's gonna be like one egg yolk that got left out of the party. It is all incorporated. So I'm gonna grab my crust with my mitt. Safety first. Now that we have this set, I'm gonna go ahead and pour the filling into here. Now remember what I said about you might not use it all. That's okay. We're gonna see if I can do this. And I'm gonna pour to about halfway, scrape, and land. That way it leaves about 1/4 of an inch at the top there in case it wants to round. So pour about halfway, scrape it off, and land it in there. Woo! I went to school, y'all! Okay, then you want to do a once over, you know, do any of them look a little left out? Did you love one more than the other? You know, make sure that they're even, because that way they're going to bake even. It's not necessarily one will be bigger than the other. You want to make your sibling jealous. You know, I'll give my little brother Grant the tiniest one, but actually it's going to have an even bake and actually look nicer. Okay, so we do have extra. I'm going to toss this in the fridge for right now. Maybe afterwards I just want to make one giant, you know, small pan or something like that. That's totally fine. Okay, now it's ready to go in the oven. These are looking great, and I'm gonna put it in the oven for 10 minutes. Now the reason I do that is I've only made about half of them, so I might need to go a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, but never shorter than 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a good time frame to cook those eggs and make sure it's thick and just right. So we're gonna go ahead and set a timer because I'm not that good. I have certain skills, but not that one. So I'm gonna do 10 minutes. Okay, that's done. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this out. It actually is looking really good, nice and fluffy, not brown around the edges at all. So I'm gonna set that there to cool for a bit, and then when it's cool enough to actually set in the fridge, we can leave it in there for about 45 minutes. So now we're gonna get started on, I know you think that I left out the rum, but what we're actually gonna make is a rum caramel sauce to go on top of it, right? Best show ever. So I'm gonna actually grab my sugar, my measuring cup, the liquid measuring cup again. They'd be so proud. And a small pot to cook it in. So what I'm gonna do is put a full cup into my pot here. Okay, so now that we have our sugar, I'm gonna go ahead and get that dash of salt again. Salt and caramel, they really mix well together. And you guys remember how I did it last time, right? I don't want to accidentally. So I'm gonna actually do a little bit more this time because it's going to be on high heat and it's really going to reduce itself into the sauce. So it's probably like 1.5 teaspoons. And it looks good to me. The cap didn't fall off. I'm happy, I'm proud. I'm gonna put this back and we're gonna measure a 1/4 cup of water. Now what I always do is I always measure past the line, and then I want to set it down flat on the counter and let it rest. And you can see that I'm above the 1/4 mark just a little bit there, so then I can pour some out until I learn my lesson. Now when you're making caramel, you do want to be particularly exact. I mean, give or take. You can always add a little bit more sugar to stiffen it up and things like that, but it's going to make your life a lot easier if you do it right the first time, right? Life lesson. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this water in here right away, and that's gonna mix together really well. It's kind of like a sugary blend there. It kind of looks like Play-Doh or sand. Looks like sand. So I'm gonna move this and my whisk over to the stovetop, and I'm gonna move our dessert out of the way, and I'm gonna put this on medium heat. Now what I wanna do with the whisk is I just wanna make sure the sugar is dissolving. So right now it's okay. It's just gonna start heating up, and it hasn't done anything yet. It still looks like wet sand. When it starts to get a little bit bubbly, that's when I can give it a stir. Really make sure they're blending. So what I'm gonna do to prep now is the second part of the caramel. I'm gonna go ahead and get some heavy whipping cream. And we also want a 1/4 cup of this. Now unfortunately for this one, it's not as easy to pour it back in. So I'm gonna get my degree, the Le Cordon Bleu degree here out, and make sure I can be exact. Am I good? I'm good, Steve. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna prep what I promised, the rum. I've got my handy dandy measuring device here, and all I'm gonna do is about 1/4 to 1/2 shot of rum. You can see this is almost gone because I love rum. Actually borrowed this from my brother. Let me use his house, lets me use his rum. That's what siblings are for. Now I'm not gonna mix these together because I actually wanna use the whipping cream as a thickening agent for the caramel. So we're gonna go ahead and check on this over here. And it's not warm enough to be a bubble yet. This is gonna probably take about 5 minutes. You really wanna let it heat up. There's gonna be bubbles and then disperse back down. You'll actually see the color change. All of the sugar will be dissolved and it'll kind of get this gold hint to it. Okay, so we're gonna bring our whipping cream and our rum over to our sauce. So now you can see it's no longer a sand texture, it's a lot more watered down and the sugar is starting to dissolve. So this will start to boil down into a golden color. That's really what we're looking for before we add the whipping cream to it. So when you tilt the pan, you can actually see that the clear is there. That means the sugar is completely dissolved and we're just reducing it down into a thick layer before we add our cream. Okay, so I'm really liking the color there. It's got light yellow. You don't want brown, that's too much. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn it up just a touch, probably about 3/4 of the way here, and I'm going to start adding my cream. And you can see it's getting a lot thicker now. So we're gonna let that sit for a minute. That last stick of butter is what we're gonna focus on now. We're gonna actually cube it into small cubes to add it to the caramel. Just gonna give it a slice down the middle. And we're gonna actually move these into the saucepan. I'm gonna drop a few in here, and then we're gonna give it a little bit of a stir to make sure it can take on the amount of butter that you're giving it. Now when you're stirring, I'm really only using a whisk to make sure that it's not clumpy, but I'm not whisking. I'm just using the whisk to stir it around, to blend it in. Okay, this is looking really good. We're gonna take our shot of rum and we're gonna go ahead and pour a little bit in. You're gonna watch the color change into a nice, beautiful caramel color. Ooh, smells like rum. Smells really good. The reason I'm adding this slowly like this is because you've actually already made your caramel. You could just reduce it into a caramel. I'm adding an additional ingredient, so I want to make sure it's not too heavy for the sauce. And that looks really good. So what I'm going to do is turn down the heat a bit. Okay, that's a really good color. The smell is unbelievable. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat. Move it off to the side here in the cooler area of the stove and grab a different bowl to pour it in. The whisk we are done with for now, and we're gonna go ahead and grab our spatula and bowl to put it into. So the reason for this bowl here is actually because the caramel, even though it's not on the heat of the stove, it's actually in the heat of the pot. So that caramel is gonna keep cooking as long as it's sitting in that bowl. So what I wanna do is pour it into a different bowl to cool down on its own terms. Just let him chill. He worked hard. The bubbles have nearly stopped. We're gonna go ahead and just give it a pour. It's thick, it's golden. I love it, smells like rum. Now this is what I call a dessert bar. Looking really good. So that is fresh caramel. I'm gonna go ahead and just set that off to the side to cool on its own, and we'll put it right with its buddy over here, the dessert. Okay, so now that dessert is cooling and ready for us for later, we are gonna do veggies. Now, I know this is the most fun part of the entire meal, right? We're gonna be making that simple meal of steak, broccoli, and corn, but you really have to think of this as, these are your children, okay? So even though you have a favorite, the steak, you have to love and treat them all equally. Mom. So as I'm like pouring shots at 10 a.m. in the morning, but it's okay, we'll shoot at 5. So it's fine. What we want to do is actually work on our veggies and see what layers we can add to them. So I'm going to show you what we can do to just a frozen bag of corns. There's multiple in here, so that's fine. And then I'm actually going to show you what to do with broccoli as well. So to get started, we're going to blanch the broccoli. Anything green, you can always do this too. It's a really good technique. I'm going to grab just a regular pot and we're going to get some water boiling. Now the reason we want the water boiling first is because we want to shock these vegetables. So we want to throw the broccoli into the already boiling water for a bit, and then we're going to bring it back to some cold water and shock it into being green and beautiful. You only need the amount of water to cover your vegetables and then a little more because it will reduce with the heat. So keep that in mind. That looks good. We're going to cover it so it contains the heat, boils faster. And I'm going to put it on my biggest stove top. all the way on high. The water can take it. So in the meantime, I'm gonna show you how to cut this broccoli a little bit more extravagantly. Now personally, I normally cut broccoli. I see a lot of people just chop off the top, but you're actually missing a lot of the stem here. So what I'm gonna do is cut up about half of it, and we don't have to worry about this piece, but then what we're gonna do is stand it up like a tree, and we're gonna cut the branches down. Now this piece you're not gonna need to use, but you could do this with all the branches, and it's actually gonna give a lot of length to what you're cooking. So we're gonna go into the tree, straight down the branch. That gives it a nice little sharp attitude edge to it, right? This is cooking with cocktails. We need a little bit of edge on there. So the more you get out of this broccoli stem, the better. And you can always trim if you think it's a little too much edge. Okay, so some of these are a little long. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just trim it at an angle to make it look nice. This is my waste pile over here. I'm just gonna put anything I think is pretty and gonna work for me over in this corner. Looking nice. It's also gonna make your plate look really full without having to eat 3 cups of broccoli. Okay, I do need a little bit more of a pile. I'm gonna be trying to do 2 plates. So we're gonna go ahead and cut a little bit more. You can kind of see that they naturally fall. When you cut it, it naturally finds a path down the stem. Okay, got a little bit extra here. I don't need all of this broccoli. You can save it for another day for a treat. So for broccoli, I tend to actually like the natural flavor of it. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna put it through the blanching process, make it that really bright green, and that's gonna actually cook it some. But then I like to cover it in a little bit of olive oil and just nature's seasonings. So you can do a little garlic, a little onion, whatever you prefer, just to bring out its natural taste. I'm gonna check on our water here. It's got a good amount of steam on there, which means it's looking pretty good. I'm seeing bubbles in the bottom. I'm gonna say we're good to go. So let's grab our bowl. Make sure we're not balancing a lid over some boiling water and trying to dump some broccoli in. Find your limits, okay? So we're gonna dump it in, not facing yourself. You don't want any of this water to splash up on you. Make sure you're out of the way. And it's gonna sink in there. You just cover it for a bit. Now you're gonna leave it there for a minute and a half. It's kind of your preference, but then what we're gonna do is I've actually filled this bowl over here with ice. The reason for that is that's really gonna help with the shock. So we're gonna put some ice cold water in. Now I'm only gonna put enough in there so that when I put the strainer in to strain this, it's gonna actually disperse the water and cover the broccoli. I don't wanna put too much, well, if you do put too much in, who cares, that's what a sink is for. But if you don't put enough in and it doesn't cover the broccoli, it's not gonna shock all of it. It's probably about 3/4 of the way, maybe 2/3. So we're gonna call that good. Get the faucet out of my way, and you can always test dunk. That covers all of the holes in my strainer. So that's a good sign to say it's gonna cover all the broccoli. So what I'm gonna do is move this bowl aside because I first have to strain the hot water out. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at how green that is, nice and bright. Now we wanna shock it, so we're gonna go ahead and turn this off, and I'm gonna strain it into the sink. Okay, so we're gonna get it out of the hot water. Okay, and then we're gonna shock it right away. They're completely covered with water. It's got a good shock to it, and they're gonna stay this bright, bright green. This also stops it from cooking, so it's actually gonna give it a little bit of a bite too when you're cooking. If you wanted to toss it in the pan with some olive oil, that's fine too. Okay, so this looks great. I'm gonna dump out my water, and I'm gonna actually use this bowl to toss some olive oil in it. Olive oil is a great natural seasoning to just help with the flavor of vegetables. If you toss it on the vegetables instead of heating it in the pan, it makes sure to coat everything. Okay, so next we're gonna start on our corn, and that way we'll be able to cook both of these at the same time. Okay, so to do the corn, it's really just frozen corn, which means you can't really mess it up. And that's perfect for anybody. So he had about half a bag in the freezer. We're gonna go ahead and use that. And what I'm gonna do is just toss some olive oil in here as well. Gives it a little bit of flavor, a little coating, And you could just toss it on the stove to heat up. Now that seems a little plain to me. You remember how we're gonna treat everybody equal, love all of our children. So what I'm gonna actually do is see what more we can add to this. So let's check out the fridge and see what we have in there. So we have some mayonnaise and we have assorted cheeses. Now mayonnaise gets a bad rep and I don't know why, because all it is olive oil, a little bit of egg yolk and some lemon. And that sounds delicious. That's got a little bit of a zing to it. I'm feeling it. I think that's gonna go well with the lime. So we already have leftover lime juice from our dessert. So if I go to grab that and incorporate it into the corn, we can make kind of like a street corn in it. And that is one of my favorites. It's delicious. I don't know if you've tried it before, you need to. I like it better when it's on the cob, but this is cheaper and it's easy and it's quick. So I like that too. So when we look at cheese, what we can add for cheese, he's got a couple of different choices here. He's got Marble Jack, cream cheese, and feta. I'm gonna go with the feta. You could do the cream cheese, that sweetness is really gonna help with the lime, but the feta is gonna work well with the mayonnaise. It's got a nice bite. So I'm gonna give maybe 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise here. And you don't wanna go overboard because it's gonna just be sauce with some corn. The corn is the star of this show. So we're gonna do a little bit of cheese. I'm not gonna go crazy on that because I want to, when I'm done, I wanna use a little cheese on the top. Now that's already gonna be incorporated in, so you don't wanna go overboard on that either. We can always add more at the end. So what are we gonna season it with? We're looking at kind of a Mexican street corn, so parsley is always good. And onion powder, garlic, maybe a little salt, and chili. Chili powder is gonna be the best ingredient for this. Now remember what I said about the salt? The reason I'm telling you to do it this way is because I've learned the hard way. And no, I was not drinking when I was cooking that. But I've had the entire cap fall off and it just sucks when you have like this beautiful dessert and then a pile of salt falls in there. So I like kosher again because it brings out the flavor a little bit more. We're gonna do some parsley. I love using parsley because you can never go overboard. You can always use, I mean, honestly, it's got a fresh look to it, a fresh taste. It makes it look pretty. Again, I'm not measuring, just whatever you feel is nice. Now the onion powder, I'm not gonna use a lot because I think onion is more, we're gonna be putting that on our steak. Garlic. Love garlic. I think we'll actually add some toast to this meal. Just toast it a little bit with a little bit of garlic on there. That would be really nice. And the main ingredient, other than you corn, because that's the main child here, is the chili. It's got a really good red to it. Now you don't want to go overboard. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit more olive oil because we put more in the pan. We're gonna make sure it slides around in there okay, it has a good coating. And when I do an olive oil, I probably do like half a shot. Everything's in shot measurement. I'm only measuring in shots. That's the rule now, I've said so. This guy is ready to go on the stove. So now because we have our corn ready, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the back burner and we can put this on low heat. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm going to start our steaks. Okay, so now on to the favorite child. You all know it's true. We're gonna start our steaks. So I put a piece of parchment down. I think that's a lot cleaner. It's a lot neater when you're especially working with vegetables and only one cooking tray. Also, it's gonna help with transfer. I'll show you. So we're gonna pull 2 of these out. What we're gonna do is start with the seasoning. Now we wanna make sure that the seasoning isn't too much because we're putting it on both sides. When I garnish with any of the other ones, I just want a very thin layer on both faces. So all I'm gonna do is give it an overall sprinkle. There's no specific measurement, right? Just living our dreams here. And I'm going to just go right down the line. That was garlic powder. Now I'm gonna do regular pepper. I love pepper. I use pepper in everything. A little cayenne, a little pop, tastes really good. We're gonna do onion, that onion powder I promised, and parsley to make it look pretty. Okay, now that we're good on this side, what I'm gonna actually do is just give it a quick push down. I don't want all the seasoning to fall off, but also it's helped a little tenderization. We're gonna flip those guys over and then we're gonna actually do the same thing. Now the easiest way to transfer this over is going to be this parchment paper here. Look at that, oh my gosh. And I'm gonna put some olive oil in the pan. And we only wanna put a little bit in to coat the bottom of the pan. Now I'm gonna turn this up just very low, and you can kind of see how the oil slowly drips. It's slowly dripping down. That's how you can tell it's not hot enough. So we're gonna go ahead and leave it there. When it coats evenly on the bottom of the pan, that means we're getting to the right temperature. So I have this on about just under a medium because I want the oil to come up. Then what we're gonna do is make sure that that meat can sizzle when we place it on there. Okay, so we're gonna try out this oil now. You can see how that rolls. It's dripping a lot faster now. So that oil is happy. I'm gonna make sure you can see where it's coated and where it's not. So I'm just making sure the pan is completely coated. That's good. That means the pan is happy, the steak is there. We wanna make sure that they're sitting even, and then we don't wanna touch them until they are ready to flip. Okay, so this is looking really good. You can kind of see that the meat is being cooked halfway. So what we're gonna do is flip it over. Oh, look at that golden seasoning. And we're gonna do the buddy as well. Yes, look at that. Beautiful. Okay, we are done. These are looking really tasty. So we're gonna go ahead and take it off of the stove. Okay, these are looking really, really good. So what we want to do after we cook a steak like this, we want to make sure that we give it some time to rest. The reason for that, we've just cooked it and tensioned all of the meat in there. So we want to make sure it has time to cool down and make sure those juices start flowing again so we can devour it. Okay, so what I'm going to do to keep the heat, but to make sure that it can still rest, I'm just going to pop this in the microwave, not cooking it, just to make sure it's contained. Okay, remember our broccoli? We've got them over here chilling in some olive oil. We're gonna bring this one to the pan. And what I wanna do with this one is actually get a fresh pan because I wanna keep the green. And I'm gonna put this on low. We're just gonna get this heated up. Now what I like to do for seasoning on this is actually nature's seasonings. This is something that has garlic, onion powder, pepper, it's got all of it mixed in. So for people who are on the fly, I use this a lot because then you don't have to open up 7 different containers just to season one thing. I really like nature's seasoning. So we're gonna give this an overall sprinkle layer. And then as it starts to heat up, you can see that there's some olive oil in the bottom there. That's okay. That's what we wanna use to coat it. So we're gonna let that heat and we're gonna check on the corn over here. How you doing, buddy? Oh my gosh, it smells so good. So it's heated up. We're gonna go ahead and stir all that seasoning in. We've got a good amount of olive oil. It's looking really creamy. So I do think that we need a little bit more mayonnaise, I'm thinking. So I'm gonna just sneak to the fridge and grab a little bit here. And we can add a little bit at any time. That's all we need. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and stir that in. Much better. It's got a thicker, kind of coated sense to it. It's almost like a dip, like a corn dip. Now we're hearing a lot of sizzling from the broccoli, so we're gonna move back here and just check them out. And sometimes when I cook broccoli in a pan, if I don't do the blanching process, I will actually cover it to help it steam. But since we've already partially cooked these, it's not needed. This is just a flavoring step of the process. We're really not gonna stay long in the pan here. Looking really good. Okay, so we've got a nice heat. If you think they're overdone, all you do is grab one by the end here, right at the tip, and lift it up. If it droops, either way, then it's overdone. So you just want it to be flexible, but you don't want it to droop. So let's grab a bigger one that's heavier. A little spring, but no drooping. We're gonna go ahead and shut the heat off. And we're gonna push this to the back burner. Okay, now we're gonna start our sauce. Okay, so now we're gonna do our steak sauce. Not just any steak sauce, we're gonna do a raspberry rum steak sauce. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. So I love working with raspberries because it's super easy to reduce them down, strain the seeds out, and top anything with it. You could do desserts, you could do steak, you could do, just eat it plain. I would, I have. So what I'm gonna do is grab a pot to put these in. And I'm gonna put about a package and a half, I think will do, but you can always add some, never the end of the world. So I've got my incorrect measuring cup here. I don't necessarily want to use this. So what I want is about, I'd say, a third amount of the sugar of the raspberries that you put in here. So the reason for that is we are reducing it into a sweet sauce, but the raspberries are already sweet enough. So the amount of sugar completely depends on your own preference. So you can use a measuring cup if you want to, but I'm just gonna kind of sprinkle it on, do my own thing. I'm using brown sugar because I'm actually gonna reduce this into a brown sauce. If you were doing, let's say, like a cake topping or a cupcake filling or something like that, you'd probably use a white sugar. I've got enough sugar in there to sprinkle over each raspberry. We're gonna go ahead and reduce this down and see if it works. So one more thing we have to add to here that we're missing, rum. We're gonna go ahead and pour. Let's do a full shot, right? You've earned it. I work hard, I know you do. We got a full shot for you. Maybe later. We're gonna go ahead and cover this up and reduce it down on the stove. You're gonna come over and put it on medium heat to really get it cooking. Now you can leave that, it's gonna reduce all the way down into a liquid and all you'll see are the seeds floating in it. When we get to that point, we're gonna actually strain it through a mesh strainer. Okay, now that the sauce is reducing, it's gonna take some time. So now we can work on what we really wanna work on, the cocktail. So I'm gonna take a couple of lowball glasses, move them to my cutting board, and I'm also gonna grab a stir spoon, some triple sec, because it's delicious, and some fun ice cubes. So if you're really feeling classy, and apparently my brother is because he has these, I gave them to him. I'm a classy broad. So I'm gonna actually just pop this in here. These are really cool ice cube trays that you can make in your freezer. She's in there, okay. So it's actually a really cool ball of ice. Now this one is really cool. This one's actually his favorite. It actually looks like a jack that you would play with. That looks so cool. Okay, so, it looks so good. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put this ice cube right in. We're gonna go ahead and start to make our cocktail. So all we're gonna make is a rum, orange, lime cocktail. I really like those flavors together. We said we were gonna be featuring rum and we're also gonna be featuring lime. So what goes good with that? Orange. Orange definitely does. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do a 3-part. So when you look at a cup, you wanna make sure, this is a lowball glass, you wanna look at the cup as 3 different parts. You're excluding the sipping range at the top. So you would probably wanna go down about 1/4 inch and don't fill past that line. Then you're gonna lower down and spread this part of the glass into thirds. I'm gonna fill the first third with rum, second third with triple sec orange, and the third Dr. Pepper. That is hard to say, I have not started drinking yet. So I'm gonna first put my rum in. There's not much left. Oh, that looks better. Okay, so now we've got a third in each. We're gonna go ahead and do some orange triple sec. Now, if you're not feeling like maybe this is too much liquor, maybe it's 10 in the morning, sorry ma, but you can also do orange juice. Now, typically I don't like the juice in there. I feel like it makes it a little bit more watered down. I like the smooth liquor taste. Now we're gonna go ahead and grab some Dr. Pepper. The reason I don't use Coke or Pepsi is because I like the added sweetness that Dr. Pepper has. You do your thing. If you wanna do Coke or Pepsi, you go for it. It's looking really good. Oh, look at that cube. It just floated right up. It looks so nice. We're classy tonight. Okay, so now we're gonna wanna do some kind of garnish. You can have a stir stick and just kind of make sure that it's stirred around. That is your choice. The reason I'm not doing a fancy shaker is because it's in a lowball glass like this. So when we're adding ice to the drink, you don't necessarily need to shake it in a shaker. And it looks like he has an orange. So we're gonna actually use that. Let's go ahead and garnish. So one thing that we're missing from this is the lime. I haven't forgotten about it. What we wanna do is we're gonna cut this orange. I'm just gonna cut the face of it off so I can get a flat edge. And I'm gonna do 2 slivers, 1 for each glass. And then I'm gonna set this guy aside. And we're gonna grab our little lime here, okay? He's been the display all day. We wanna make sure he gets his moment. So I'm gonna cut this lime in half. So I'm gonna actually use 1 lime to juice into the top, and I'm putting it right on the ice cube. It's gonna dribble in. It's your preference. How much do you wanna put in there? I'm not making a limeade for the kids. This is for me, the adult, kinda. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit on. The other thing that you can do is actually run on the rim, and then you don't have to put it inside. Or you could do both. So then for the garnishes here, I'm gonna be really simple, and I'm just gonna cut a slit from the middle out. You don't have to garnish, it's kind of up to you, but to be honest, garnishing is like my favorite part. I think that's got a clean, fun look to it, and the ice cubes are so classy. This is like pinky up cocktails. Okay, so now that the cocktails are ready, I'm gonna go ahead and check on the sauce. Okay, we've got a really good bubble in that sauce. It looks really, really good. So I'm gonna stir it and kind of break down those raspberries. And you can see they're just kind of folding over each other. They've really got a good, soft texture. Now it's okay to be lumpy because those are those seeds. They're really gonna be in there. But if you feel like it's needing a little bit extra liquids, if you really feel like it's dense, you can always add a little bit of water. You can add more rum if you want to. I am not going to. I think it's smelling really good. Okay, so now that we've shut off the heat, I'm gonna carry the sauce over to my mesh strainer in the sink. So now we're always straining in the sink because I'm a klutz. But also, if you're scared that it's gonna go down the drain, you can always put some parchment paper in the bottom of the sink. So I'm gonna aim right for the center of the strainer because I wanna make sure it gets into the bowl below it. Now that this is done, I'm gonna set that aside on the metal there, and we're gonna make sure I have every single ounce of juice out of this. So if you press down, that kind of helps it strain faster. You don't have to just sit here and wait, and you can see it straining out of the bottom there. All right, we'll move this to the trash. Okay, so now we're gonna walk in with a taste test spoon, right? We want to taste everything before we serve it to people. And I'm just gonna coat it in it because it's a really thin sauce right now. Oh my God. Oh, that tastes so good. Okay, so I can definitely taste the rum in there, and there's actually an even amount of sweetness. Now, if the sweetness was overpowering, what you can do is pair a different kind of sauce like Worcestershire. I always would put maybe 1 to 2 drops, don't go overboard, and that kind of pulls that sauce taste back to match the steak. So you're trying to balance sweet with steak, with savory. So that's a really good way to do that. I'm not gonna add it though because it's perfect. So it is a little thin. All I'm gonna do to save that is I'm gonna wipe out the pan that we already had the seeds in, so there's no seeds. I'm gonna put the sauce right back into the pan. We're gonna see if we can't reduce it a little bit, maybe add some cornstarch just to give it that little bit of a thick sauce texture. Okay, and this is the meal. It looks delicious, it's gonna taste delicious. I'm gonna eat it right now. Just to recap on a few things, it was your basic steak, but it's topped off with this rum raspberry sauce. It's more of a light, thin sauce that you can dip your steak in, so I've paired it here with the shot glass. And then also the natural flavor of the broccoli, I think is something that you can really appreciate, especially since we topped off that corn with some feta, because feta is beta. And I just made that up, so we're gonna patent that. And I did do that garlic toast that I mentioned I might do in the beginning because it's always delicious. Very simple, just some olive oil on top of that. Cooking with cocktails is fun, it's engaging, and it's delicious. So I think the next time you make a meal, this one's a little bit wilted. We're gonna give that to my brother. There you go, Grant, when you get home. I'm gonna take the pretty one, yep. Next time you're cooking, try to think about what level you can give it. What can you do that can step it up a little bit more? because it's your kitchen and it's your creation. I made this meal the way that I appreciate it, the way I enjoy it. Well, not quite. I mean, if it's your kitchen, you gotta enjoy it the way you do best. Now we're good. So, let's enjoy it. I know I will.